feminism, art museums and books may not sound like the epicenters of political movements, but they have always reshaped the way people think about power, gender, and justice. Feminist writing and art posed questions, broke barriers, and opened new possibilities through the amplification of women's subjective experiences. The mantra, "the personal is political," invented by the second wave feminists, it sits at the core of these efforts, and it frames experiences such as household work, pregnancy, and rape not as personal burdens, but as a sign of larger injustice. Feminism dominated art and literature for centuries, even before the word came into being. Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman called for women's education and autonomy, proposing that the mind must be strengthened by reflection. Jane Austen was concerned with the social and economic realities of marriage, revealing that women were used as commodities in a patriarchal system. And in the visual arts, women such as Artemisia Gentileschi stood against the male gaze. Her Judith beheading Holofernes, described by the art historian Mary Gerard as an icon of female strength and resistance. Despite their genius, women in art were underappreciated, leaving a historical gap that later feminist movements sought to fill. This possibility that individual experience might be a mirror of social order rose to prominence in the 1960s with the aid of feminist consciousness-raising groups. These assemblies encouraged women to talk freely about issues such as unpaid household work and reproductive rights, linking individual hardships with institutional oppression. Virginia Woolf had predicted it decades before in A Room of One's Own. She wrote, "A woman has to have money and a room of her own to write fiction, and creative agency was about financial and individual autonomy." Woolf's words serve as both a critique and a call to arms for women to demand space in all ways. Art became a particularly vibrant vehicle for feminist engagement in which issues of representation, identity, and equality took center stage. The Guerilla Girls were an anonymous group of feminist artists formed in the 1980s to confront art sexism and racism. Their provocative posters, like the infamous "Do Women Have to Be Naked to Get into the Met Museum?" brought laughter alongside brutal honesty. The art critic Lucy Lippard hailed their project as a wake-up call to an industry that prides itself on progressiveness while systematically excluding women and minorities. At the same time, projects such as Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party reclaimed women's accomplishments with a grand installation of historical and mythological women. Such pieces repurposed art to make history, and not just beautiful things. Where artists were making physical spaces for feminist discourse, writers were challenging literary conventions. Woolf's stream of consciousness experiments exposed the inner lives of women and made their inner lives transparent, and later bell hooks took feminism a step further and added race and class to the mix. In Ain't I a Woman?, she decried the mainstream feminists for marginalizing women of color. Feminism in the United States has never emerged from the women who are most victimized by sexist oppression. They have the most to gain. Their liberation is a threat to the status quo. Hook's activism bridged theory and lived experience, not unlike the intersectional activism of feminist art circles. Feminist art and literature often address similar issues: visibility, representation, power. Both mediums work to bring women's images and voices to the public. The Guerilla Girls movements demanded female artists be included, as Woolf argued for women's entry into the literary and historical canon. Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale, described a dystopian future in which women were relegated to their sexual functions, an indictment of the evils of patriarchal oppression. And similarly, Cindy Sherman's photographs questioned the distortion of female identity caused by media stereotypes, with staged self-portraits posing as a mirror to society. These artists didn't merely criticize established structures, they envisioned alternatives where women could be whole. Art and literature also inspired activism. The Guerilla Girls didn't just lament, they put galleries and museums on notice, and in the same way, Adrienne Rich's Of Woman Born transformed popular understandings of motherhood as a force for power and a place of oppression. The idea that feminism was to become accessible to a wider public took shape in Roxane Gay's Bad Feminist, an idiosyncratic mix of anecdotes and incisive cultural criticism. And in Gay's words, "I would rather be a bad feminist than no feminist at all." Such works took feminist theory out of the academy and into the popular sphere, showing that creativity could remake not only art, but the world as well. And feminist art and literature persist, taking new forms and audiences. Artists such as Kara Walker make silhouettes to reflect on slavery and racial violence. Nan Golden reflects on addiction and grief through intimate photography. Feminist voices are often amplified digitally through Instagram art activism and internet zines that are easily accessible on a global nature. And at the literary level, modernists such as Adichie and We Should All Be Feminists and Solnit's Men Explain Things to Me, they follow in the footsteps of previous feminists by using pithy language to question and dismantle outdated practices. And feminist art and literature have always had the same purpose: to bring to the foreground voices silenced or forgotten by society. And by turning their lived experiences into political declarations, these crafts pushed audiences to rethink the norm. In a painting or literary work, these pieces make clear that creativity is not merely self-expression, but a way to remake what we know. The personal really can be political. As always, if you enjoyed this video, you know the drill: like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world. And this could be a good one to watch next.